Okay, here we are. Good afternoon, Facebook Live. We are, let's talk about race. We are on Facebook Live. My name is Diane Wong, and I'm here and with two people that you recognize. Go ahead. Can you say who you are?
Pharaoh Saunders, always happy to be here.
Everyone, good to see everyone. My name is Charles Minton, as you can see. Pleasure to be before you all again.
Yes, and these are exciting and complex times that we're in, and it's hard to tell as you move forward. And it's like we're doing this show. We're trying to. What are we trying to do? Let me ask that as a question. What are we doing right now? Because we've moved into a podcast format of just talking. We haven't continued to bring in guests. So why is that? What are we doing? Go
Give me a
ahead.
little more. Give me a little more, Diane. What do you mean? What are we doing in terms
Okay.
of the movement, the cause,
Or anything. I mean, when you think about what we're doing now, this event that we're doing right now on Facebook Live, why are we doing this? What are we trying to bring? What's going on in the country and in the world that we're trying to capture? Or are we? What are we doing right now with this format for this podcast?
Oh, there we go. Yes, I think we're trying to capture this revolutionary spirit, that's clearly in the air in terms of the need for change across all facets of our society. We got a little snippet of that change in terms of the changing administration. Now we just need to, continue ramping up the pressure on various individuals, various entities throughout the diaspora, just in terms of the need for change. And I think that comes through knowledge, perhaps, we, as you've spoken through our previous podcast, a lot of folks don't know what they want, in essence. And I do feel like, with the gathering that Diane within this collaborative that you've been able to put together, we have like-minded individuals who's willing to take the mantle in terms of outlining a course of action, in terms of how can we sort of be the change agents or the agents for change moving forward within this society. And I think that starts with just being a representative voice in regards to that need for change, in regards to the struggle that is continuous. Regardless of who's in office, there's still a struggle that we're fighting. But it's important for folks to recognize that struggle. It's been ongoing since, Black Indigenous folks, have been, on American soil. And then with that said, within the past few podcasts, we've been discussing this idea of reparations. And I think that hits, pretty much on target in terms of just the need on a massive scale for equity. And I think that starts with, I know that starts with demanding that the US power structure, this white supremacist government provides reparations for Black folks who can have a direct connection, who can provide a direct connection to slavery. And I think that's where the Racial Justice Collaborative comes in, just in terms of outlining a strategic course of action for the US government to do that. So I think we're in a powerful position right now just to get, make our voices heard in terms of that demand, and then hopefully galvanizing a force for everyone to pretty much jump on board and ride this wave with us.
And so what Charles said just now, and what he always says, is that that there needs to be a continuous movement and energy, and you need to hear voices all the time. So, and I'm going to call on Pharaoh, but let me frame that in terms of how I see it. I think about, I was in a class in law school years ago. Roberto Unger was teaching, and he was in the Brazilian Revolution. And what he taught was that he said that the people who are the revolutionaries are not going to be the same people who are going to create a new government. So he said what happens is that when a revolution starts, and you can imagine this, close your eyes, you can see it in your mind. The revolutionaries move onto the field and there's a struggle going on, like what Charles was talking about. There's a struggle going on. And even if it isn't an armed struggle, we're in a struggle for ideas right now, but there's a struggle going on. But he said that around the edges of the struggle are people and groups who are coming up with ideas. And so as the revolutionaries move through, the power gets tossed up in the air. It throws it up because whatever was just cannot be. And so that gets thrown up. And so the revolutionaries move out, and the people around the edges with their groups and their ideas, they move into the center. And the people who are able to hold the ground in the center with kind of a grassroots effort and say, okay, we're staking this out. When the power comes down, it's going to fall on them. And that's how a new form of government, whatever that means, will start to take place. It's going to be whoever is managing to think ahead and come up with a plan and be there, but come in and let the power flow down on them. So Pharaoh, let me ask you, you just heard me frame something, and then you heard Charles, and can you put those two things together? Or can you talk about how you see the time that we're in?
I mean, I think that there's a lot of truth to what you said. I think that that's something that you see very frequently in historical examples, especially in terms of you're talking about very literal, revolutions that are born out of like insurrection and things like that. What we're dealing with now isn't so much that. There's some similarities, but it's much more social than militarized or anything like that, which is the example that you gave. These are those from a Brazilian professor talking about the Brazilian Revolution. But there's still lessons to be learned from those things and similarities to be had from those things. So being prepared to receive the transfer of power that's going to happen when a large scale transference or change begins to take place is important, because very few things will entirely ride out the transition from actively trying to make something happen to it actually beginning to take root and form into something else, at least not without preparation. So yeah, like you said, it's the people that position themselves to take that are the ones that generally make that vision come into fruition.
And I want to bring Charles back in, because now what I just described is like looking at it and really a strategic plan to watch around and see the power going up, watching the revolution happen, but positioning yourself with a fullness of ideas, so that when the opportunity, and to know when the opportunity is there, not before. Timing is always everything. To be there with enough forces to make it so that you're in the center of things. So what Charles talks about all the time is keeping a movement and a flow, getting the people to keep them involved, so that they're not sleeping after we just had an election and with a fair success. When I think of Georgia and the 2 Democratic senators, that's a big success. So what Charles always says is, don't go back to sleep. Now do something, speak up, do something. So Charles, from what I just described, and the way you think about it, how do you see those? How do you see that? And maybe that's what you mean when you say the racial justice collaborative is moving on creating ideas and expanding on ideas and bringing in people to flesh out the ideas. How do you see all that?
Right. So just piggybacking what you and what Pharaoh said, pretty much the essence of that is Black folks not falling back asleep, for better or for worse, with Donald Trump in office, Black folks were forced, to sort of be aware of what's going on. Prior to that, I feel like with Obama, I guess, Black folks, I guess we could fall, a lot of Black folks fell victim in terms of, we got our quote unquote guy in there, so all is well in a lot of ways. So in other words, folks who took up the arms in terms of, racial justice and revolution and the need for change sort of didn't know how to feel, with a Black man representing, being, ahead of the United States. But I do think with Donald Trump, it sort of forced everyone into a mode for doing something. And that doing something is tell Black folks, to what you mentioned, Diane, in terms of Georgia and all across the country that's getting out there to vote in record number. But with that said, it is important to note that this idea for reparations, has been in place for years and years, going back to, let's say, maybe even like the middle to late 80s with the Senator Conyers, I believe, passing the HR 40 or hoping to pass the HR 40 bill every year, and it essentially being turned away every year. And then even, going deeper, and that, perhaps we could, discuss this here. What's the fear? Like what's the honest, I guess, reason for individuals across all races having some sort of issue or problem with Black folks getting what we rightfully deserve? Reflecting, we were talking briefly about Obama, and of course, Obama wasn't necessarily the most progressive president. He had some statements. He made a statement, I believe.
He was not a progressive at
Right.
all. He was,
Right.
he was a
Absolutely.
moderate.
Right.
He's a moderate, and that was. Let me pick one thing, and I want to get to what you're saying. But one thing that, if I look at one problem that we fell apart on.
Mm-hmm.
We just waited for Obama like he was the magic Negro,
There
and he
you
was
go.
going to be able to
Right.
do something. There were many things that happened when we didn't take to the streets. We didn't pour out and demand. I mean, look at Merrick Garland. Now that I'm listening to him, first time I've been able to get a chance to hear him, he's solid. I mean, that was the person that Obama wanted on the Supreme Court. And did we get him? No. And did we, for a year, they held him back and did not get President Obama his Supreme Court choice. And here we see that with Trump, 8 days after Ruth Bader Ginsburg dies, just, 2 weeks before the election. But that's on us. That is on us. We did not support President Obama to say, we've got your back and we demand. See, if we had poured out and demanded, then he could have said, I've got to do this. You guys, I've got to take stronger action. But we never did it because we were waiting for him, the magical Negro, to turn things and to change. And so I think what you're saying now, Charles, we have to have learned that lesson.
Right.
So we cannot expect that one person, whether it was Barack Hussein Obama or Joe Biden, we've got to push a demand. Look at the Tea Party. Remember the Tea Party? They were all over the place all the time, and they moved the Republican Party.
Right. And then well, what you just said is taking me so many different places, but to that point, I think it was really important for Black folks to not just, put these elected officials who we put in office, a couple of months ago, in their positions, without giving them a platform or specifically an outline in terms of the needs or the needs that Black Americans have in this country. I think it was really important for Black folks to do that. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do so. Folks got in, they're holding their, specific, positions. And I think now it's important to just keep the pressure on them. And to your point, Diane, for us to do our part in terms of ensuring that our demands are met and, we push forward in terms of our initiatives. Really quickly, so for folks who don't know, Obama had I guess he was on a specific show, and a little snapshot of what he said was what I saw during my presidency was the politics of white resistance and resentment, the talk of welfare queens and the talk of underserving poor, and the blackish or the backlash against affirmative action. All that made the prospect of actually proposing any kind of coherent, meaningful reparations program struck me as politically not only a non-starter, but potentially counterproductive. I think that's at the heart, Diane, of what you were saying, just in terms of Black folks beginning now to shape the narrative that our elected officials go into government with, as opposed to the other way around.
Well, so, but Charles, it not
I think
just
it's more complicated than that.
yeah, okay.
Right, of course, but I do think, of course, but I think right now it's really important, as we're doing now within the collaborative, we're beginning to shape that narrative in terms of outlining what we believe to be a demand for reparations for Black folks, which, you know, to your point, Diane, wasn't done in the past. We sort of held Obama in such esteem. We really didn't hold him or any other individuals accountable for our needs being met. So that
Charles,
cognitive dissonance that white folks,
Charles,
that Black folks continue to have, you know?
See, I don't think that's a fair assessment, because if you look, you'll see that there were plenty of Black people that have been making demands for a long time. But there's a difference between individual groups like the Racial Justice Collaborative making demands and individual groups like the Racial Justice Collaborative forming and growing and forming coalitions with others until we can really take a stand. And then I don't think even that we need to go to the United States government. I think we need to make a demand on the United States.
And that is still going to the United States government. But like the difference that I'm drawing to here is that that isn't something that can be made on the executive level. Like his statement that he gave that you just read is exactly what I thought it would be, which is just very pragmatic and thinking about the calculus behind these things. It's not about what's right. It's not about what's deserved. And I think that's generally the case when you're talking about, you know, various ends of liberals when they say things like that, or Black people when they say things like that. Usually, sometimes it is just said out of thinking it's not deserved. And for a lot of people, it is also just saying that they don't think it's deserved. But in a case like that, it's not Obama saying that reparations aren't deserved. He's saying that it's not worth bringing up in an official capacity as president because it won't get passed. And he presented the logic for why it wouldn't get passed through the House, why it wouldn't get passed through the Senate, because of the backlash politics that are so prevalent then and still are now, you know, though there is a bit of pushback now. And those are legitimate points, you know, but because that's not something that can be pushed forward or rammed through on the executive level. That's not up to the president. The president can stop it from happening, but a president can't make it happen. You know, so the thing that you have to do in order to actually reach those kinds of ends is that has to be done within the House, that has to be done within the Senate. Those are where laws come from. The president, Obama, even if he wanted to prioritize that, that wouldn't have changed anything, because Mitch McConnell wasn't going to let that pass in the Senate. It's irrelevant.
So there we're looking at, I mean, we see Obama as president and we expect that he should be able to do things, but we also are all aware that there wasn't anything after the first 2 years. And this is what hopefully Joe Biden is learning. The first 2 years, the Democrats had the Senate and the House. And that's how they got the healthcare initiative that they got. It took all the political capital that they had to push that through. So immigration didn't happen. There certainly nothing like reparations or anything close to reparations. And so as you're talking about reparations, I see not just in the 60s and 70s and 80s, I see a straight line from slavery all the way through of a demand of an effort for reparations. And I think a story can be told about those events along the way and why reparations haven't happened and why they can happen now. Or we can go right up to COVID, and we can, all the excuses that people have given, and you can see who's suffering from COVID, who doesn't have health insurance, who doesn't have wealth. And why is that? because Black people are people who were freed after 200 plus years of slavery with nothing.
So
Look
we
at
all
the
know
sky.
of the standards of policing bill that just got passed in the House, right?
No, tell us about that.
Okay, so there is a very important bill, and it's something that we can talk about at greater length at another show, though I'm happy to talk about it now, which is largely standardizing policing things. Just off the top of my head, important things that it does is makes all sorts of various physical holds that have been used by police for a very long time illegal, as well as removing qualified immunity, and also making national-wide databases for law enforcement officers that are fired to avoid them just being moved around from department to department in different towns and things like that. And that just passed with one Republican congressman voting for it, for yes, who then later went to say that he voted for it by accident because he apparently hit the wrong button, which is to say that none of them wanted to pass it. And that just passed, right? Because there's a Democratic majority in the House, even less so than there was 2 years ago, but there still is one. And so that just passed. It's that, which is something that is, by any rational point of view, an incredibly reasonable set of laws, just barely passed with a massive partisan tilt, the furthest partisan tilt possible, which is 100-0. And it's not complicated. It's not confusing why so many people would think that trying to push for reparations for slavery, like financial restitution for that, would be so difficult that it wouldn't be worth doing. And it doesn't, and it's not about whether it's right, because I definitely think that people, like so many people, definitely Obama, but so many others, think that it's morally right or justified. But it comes down to the calculus that goes with passing these bills, how much time and effort has to be put into doing it, and how many well-intentioned bills, because there have been things like this proposed to Congress before. It's not like it's never happened. They just never pass. They get sent all the time, and they just get thrown on the floor, and they never make it out of committee.
It's funny, as you're talking, I was watching interview from George Blow, I believe his name was, and he has a book that's coming out.
Charles Blow.
Charles Blow, yeah, sorry. Yeah. What did I say?
You said George, but
Charles Blow, right.
His book is significant.
Yeah, he has a book coming out, The Devil You Know. So the essence of what he's saying is, to Pharaoh's point, most of the, the groundswell for change is happening up north. But there's a historical reason for that in terms of, the northern migration, So Pharaoh was saying, Charles Blow, just recently wrote a book, The Devil You Know. So the essence of what you were saying in terms of, Southerners, not being progressive and not acknowledging, simple things that, you think the common person would acknowledge and understand. And I think, the historical perspective for that is, due to northern migration. So in other words, Southern folks who just, wanted, more opportunities, they went up north. So with them came, various, progressive ideals and, essentially more minority, well, particularly Black folks, went up north for better, job opportunities. So with them left progressive ideals and went from south to north. So essentially what he was saying was perhaps Black folks need to start thinking about moving south to sort of stem the tide, to sort of provide more balance within various ideals and laws, taking place in terms of, north versus south. So interesting thought. And he sort of painted as, Harry Belafonte saying, where are the radical thinkers? And that, and then, very, quickly in terms of what you were saying about Obama, I think, the calculus is there in terms of what Obama was saying, but I think it's sort of a cop-out. I would have liked to have seen him attempt to make an effort towards doing that and then getting shot down, as opposed to saying, I assumed that would be the case, and that's why I didn't do it. That's great. But, my personal opinion, that's, again, I'm just saying for myself, I would love to have seen him make an effort.
But if it was futile. He could not pass anything, nothing.
Well, the first 2 years, remember, he had the House and Senate, though, the first 2 years while he was in office.
And the first 2 years is when they passed, when they got health care through. I mean, because that was the calculus. They decided that was the thing they were going to go for.
And that
Now,
has to be done even with Democratic control of something, because not all
Right.
Democrats are equally liberal. You know, like even now with the just barely Democratic Senate majority, there's so many extremely moderate Democrats that they couldn't even pass this COVID relief bill without narrowing it down further than it was, because 50% is just barely 50% with the vice president to break it. And there are Democrats that are, you know, in the Democratic Party but aren't as liberal, and they don't want to post the same ways and you know, pass the same
because
laws.
they're in states that, I mean, they're in Trump territory. So, but let's look at this because we talked about reparations and why reparations haven't passed, and we started with the question, what is the fear of reparations? But then also Pharaoh just raised, and we're talking about the Congress, but Pharaoh just said that we just passed a, a, a bill that had to do with with policing. So it's not just reparations. Here we've got a bill that had to do with policing, and that passed 100-0. I mean, there's no Republicans voting for those things. So let's ask the question, and it's not like there aren't Republican people who have issues with the police, and it's not like there aren't Republicans that need food and housing and healthcare. But so why is it that it looks like people essentially vote against when it comes down to it? Look, they had 75 million people voted for Trump. So what is that? So it's a bigger issue than just it's not just reparations. It's not just police issues. There's something else going on, so that Republicans 100% are against everything that has to do with Black anything, if the way I look at it. So even if you look at right now what else is going on, we've got this whole voting. We've got Republican governors across the country, and there's more, like what, 35 of the 50 states of Republican governors, and they are doing everything that they can to make sure that really Black people, that's who they're trying to keep from voting, don't vote. So there's that. So what does all of that mean when we look at the country and we see that? And they're trying to get, the Democrats are trying to have a federal rule that's going to protect voting rights, and Republicans are going to 100% vote that down. So what does that say to your question of what is it? It's not just a fear of reparations. There's some more bigger underlying fears going on, and what are those?
Tracy, go ahead, man.
No, yeah, I agree completely. You know, it comes down to a lot of the calculations and you know, the sort of how it's always presented, you know, the image of the scheming, you know, always calculating politician, is because those are the things that you have to think about. You know, it's, you know, unless you are in an incredibly fortunate situation as a politician, you very rarely can vote entirely with your conscience. In fact, I would say that's never the case. But the more fortunate your situation is, the more your personal, you know, base that elects you to your position has in common with you, the more easy it is to vote with your conscience. But that isn't as common as people would even believe for people where that seems to be the case, let alone for when it's evident that it isn't the case, such as, you know, like liberal elected officials, or I shouldn't say liberal, Democratic elected officials in you know, red areas, or even the other way around. You have to go with what your population would expect of you, or you won't have your position. And part of that comes to the potentially more moral end of wanting to be able to make an impact that is good when you can. The other end is just wanting to hold on to your position and to your power for personal reasons. And both of
Right.
those things are calculated with these people in these positions. So,
And then to
So
that point,
what
Pharaoh,
what's
and
behind
specifically,
that? Go ahead, Tim.
right. No, yeah, I'm just, I think it ties into specifically this, the greatest sin ever, attributed to any group of people in terms of slavery. I think it goes even back to that, just in terms of just the systematic oppressive ideals, politics, laws, which have been enacted against Black people in this country, literally from its inception. And I think that sort of has trickled down to where we are now in terms of, getting a small crumb in terms of justice in reference to that police bill, which is being passed. But, Diane, in terms of the distinction between Democrat and Republican, I look at the evils which have been, attributed, which we can attribute to America, as, being beyond a party. I don't look at it as Democratic or Republican. I look at it as, both two sides of the same coin, two sides of the same currency. I hold both parties accountable for where Black people are in this country. Of course, at this point, perhaps even, now, one party sort of holds a little more common sense than the other. But historically, I think both parties in this country in general have done this part in terms of keeping Black folks in a certain position. Just even reflecting a couple of weeks ago with the, the report, the FBI, in terms of the FBI having a direct connection in terms of leading to the death of Malcolm X. The FBI is supposed to serve everyone, so what pretty much the FBI took it upon itself and working in conjunction with various other individuals, of course, directly leading to the death of one of, I think, Black America's greatest heroes in Malcolm X. So that's just to me, pretty much a symptom of the greater issue in reference to what America has represented for years and years in terms of keeping Black folks down. So I think now our only option is to demand what's rightfully due to us. And, to your earlier point, not so much going to a politician, not so much going to a president, but specifically, what are we going to do individually? In terms of like just being a citizen, just being a tax-paying person in this country. What are we going to do? Not looking for anyone else to do something for us. What can we do specifically to begin to correct this change? And I think within the collaborative, we're doing our part, and we're hopefully going to get a groundswell of support in terms of pushing those initiatives forward. But now the responsibility falls on all of us, because it's crystal clear, and this is just what we know about in terms of what happened with the FBI with Malcolm X. There's been various other instances, various other cases throughout the years where, the ideals of Black people, just fighting for basic human rights have been obstructed. And I think the time for change is immediate, and it has to happen right now.
Well, but see, Charles, I don't think that, I think that it's like what Pharaoh said. You've got representatives of groups, and they're trying to have their finger on the pulse to get a sense of what their groups want so that they can be reelected. So it's like Trump, who represented a certain face, but that representation is of a body of, we're talking not just the representatives, we're talking about the United States citizenry. And the United States citizenry is against Black people having anything. And they do that, and they demand certain things of their representatives. And so no matter,
at least in enough places, that's
in
the
enough
case.
in enough place. I mean, it's a pretty interesting split, which is, like you said, Charles, it's not 100%, but I mean, to me there's a difference right now. There hasn't always historically been a big difference, but right now there's a difference with your Democrats and your Republicans, and so the Republicans would take a ne'er-do-well, womanizing, sexual harasser, racist, and raise him to be president with no redeeming qualities other than that he was white and he was standing for white supremacy. So
and claimed to be wealthy.
But he's standing for white supremacy, And so
Right.
why did people vote for him? Because they want to go back to the 50s and have the kind of white supremacy that they had then. So this is a stand. It may not be the last stand, but this is a big stand. White supremacy has now, it's not even hidden anymore. It's not even trying to be hidden. It is 75 million strong, stepping up and saying, we want this president because he represents white supremacy. And no matter what people say, this former president has when he came down the escalator, he said Mexicans are rapists and they're not good people and they're criminals. I mean, racist. When he was the birther movement. He was pushing President Obama to show his papers, and so they like that because that represents white supremacy in the John Wayne style. They wanted John Wayne, and they got white supremacy John Wayne in Trump. And so it's not about our representatives, it's about who we are as a country. The people of the United States want to return to the times when Black people, if not enslaved, at least got off the sidewalk.
Diane, they give you a little pushback. I mean, not to go back and forth, nothing you said can be disputed, but the 1994 crime bill was passed by Clinton and Biden, in terms of, putting Black folks in positions where they're incarcerated, in record numbers.
Charles,
so
if you go back to the 19...
Mike is both parties. I don't hold one ahead of the other. I think they're both at fault.
I'm just saying that Black people were 100% for, because it's the things that we hear and learn, and you hear the welfare queen. That was the same time that they pushed back on welfare, work to welfare. I mean, all of those were pouring out ideas about the lack of everything in Black people, and Black people, we're just as full of white supremacy almost as everybody else. And so now it's not just white supremacy, but anti-Blackness, which is a topic that we often talk about. And so we're anti-Black, and so Black people, we're all anti-Black. We're just brainwashed. And Black people are anti-Black in internalized oppression. We believe it about ourselves, but we also believe it about each other. White people believe they're superior, and they believe that the inferior is Black people. So we're coming at it from two different angles.
And Diane, you're raising a good point.
We're all doing the same thing, putting down Blackness. And so until we can come to grips with that, we're our own worst enemies. We were behind the crime bill. Mm-hmm. We wanted him to do 3 strikes and you're out. Now we see it differently, but now the waking up has to be just not pushing back on the government, not pushing back on white people. We've got to stop and take a look at ourselves and heal from our internalized depression.
But I guess you're raising a great point. So now how do we do that? How do we sort of develop our own, I guess, Black nationalist ideals as a diaspora? Black folks, and people need to realize, we represent such a rich, diverse group of individuals. We're not all from the North, we're not all from the South, we're not all Republican, we're not all Democrat, we're not all rich, we're not all poor. But white folks have a tendency to sort of lump us into just one specific type of person, like all Black people are this, and to that point, how can we begin to heal ourselves? I think we're on the right track in a lot of ways. More people more than ever are voting, and more Black folks are entering into college and becoming entrepreneurs, but we're nowhere near where other races are in this country. So I guess
but Charles, that's because we don't take ourselves to task on the anti-Blackness. I mean, we push back. What do you mean? That. When you're in a Black group and you start talking about Black people and it's not like each one of us can't point to exactly what we're talking about. We hear it from our birth. We hear about, you know, well, I won't go into it here, but you know all the things that we hear. And so when we're talking about, we've had, Pharaoh and I have done panel discussions with Black people, not necessarily African Americans, but Afro-Caribbeans. And when they come to this country as Bajans and as Jamaicans, one of the first things that they hear from their elders is stay away from African Americans. So we believe that African Americans are at the bottom of the barrel. We other Black people. So, and of course, the same thing for Asians and South Asians, and everybody is told that Black people are violent and you stay away from them. And more than that, that to become a good American citizen, a white supremacist, you become a white supremacist, and you denigrate the African American. So there's a lot of things going on. Yeah. So that's how we do it. We look clearly at what we're talking about, internalized oppression. And until we can stop that, until we can stop telling our children that, you know, bring somebody light-skinned in here to improve your complexion, and that your nose is too wide, so that as soon as you get $2 to rub together, you run out and get your nose narrowed. You know, you straighten your hair because there's something wrong with this. I mean, everywhere, you hear it everywhere, but we hear parents, Black parents, always talking about Black kids, you know, raised by white parents, and they say, do something with that child's hair, because just having hair that comes out of your head apparently is not good enough. It has to be straightened so it looks like it's neat and it's contained. Well, that is white supremacy, live and well in Black people.
And I think, you know, where the collaborative comes in, I think Pharaoh might have mentioned this. I think you touched on it, you know, previous podcasts. I think the component that we can very earnestly provide for individuals is that historical perspective in terms of giving Black folks a different, I guess, a set perspective, a different scope, a different ideal in terms of our history. It's beyond slavery. Even, you know, prior, there was a life, there was an essence of who a Black person was in this world beyond slavery. And I think it's important to just provide that narrative for individuals, not only, you know, kids, but just individuals. And I think that would sort of help in terms of the healing, in terms of Black folks not having a defeatist attitude in reference to who they are, in reference, you know, to other races. But it's, you know, to your point, Diane, beginning to just have that internalization of just being somebody, just being something, you know, having the power to just, you know, lift yourselves up and do whatever it is you want to do in this world. And, you know, really quickly reflecting, when I was a principal of middle school, I every day I had the kids, you know, say this mantra, you know, 5th through 8th grade, LEAP, leadership, excellence, accountability, and perseverance. And whoo, they were annoyed at me every day. I made them say it, you know, and there was a little mantra behind it. But it's sort of, I hope that it did. It just gave them to just have like that self-internalization in terms of, well, who am I and how can I be a better person? And I think that's at the heart of the healing that needs to take place with our people. And hopefully Charles, we can start, you know, doing that on a greater scale.
I don't think we have to. I think it's good to know that before slavery and there were African, you know, empires and I mean, all that'll come back because, you know, what was hidden is always going to come back. But we can just go from, just look at slavery, and we can look and say, look at that. And that Black people were sort of freed with nothing, not even 28, 30, 40 acres and a mule, nothing, no food, no shelter. And look where we are now. Look at the Olympians. Look at Venus. Look at who we are. Look what we've out of nothing. And then you look at the violence. You look at the burning and the lynching and the rules and the black codes and the Jim Crow and the humiliation. And you look at everything that's been tried to hold us down and kill us off because they thought back in slavery, because we were dying of disease, because we had nothing, no place to live, no way to make any money, or not even to buy, to grow food. And then we had to start doing sharecropping. And look where we have done. We've survived and we thrive and we're strong. And we're the strongest people on earth right now. And we are the leaders that are going to lead the United States and maybe the world out of the condition that we're in, because there's nothing you can throw at Black people, nothing that we haven't already experienced. White people fall in a minute because they're soft. They're soft because they have everything. They haven't had, and they don't have any history of struggle. They didn't learn anything at their mother's knee about all the things they've come through. Just look at that. Look at who we are right now. Look at there used to be gangs that people used to talk about. Well, I mean, that was very entrepreneurial, that they could come up with, ways of all they needed was the opportunity to take the smarts that they had and put it into business, because they were running businesses. And that's who we are. In spite of everything this country and the world has thrown at us, we have a TV station right now. We're talking, we're 3 African Americans who are now, we're leading an organization, and we are going to lead the world. Black people, out of necessity, because we're the ones who can do it, because there's nothing you can throw at us, nothing that we haven't already experienced, and we know the way out. We can live through COVID, even though we're dying in droves, but we know how to put together enough money to get the food and do the things we need. Look at who we are. Look at that.
And that's why I'm excited by some of the workshops that we have upcoming in terms of painting that narrative for individuals. And hopefully that healing not only begins with Black people, but white people have some healing as well to do, because it's in their DNA. So it's representative, it's something that we all feel in this society. So there's some healing that needs to take place for everyone within our society.
Well, white people have to heal the white supremacy out of their soul. I mean, Black people have to heal the white supremacy, because we've taken that on to go along to get along, to try to survive, to try to have a job, to do your hair, because they wouldn't hire you if you didn't have a straightened hair. I mean, there are reasons for this internalized oppression. White people have the soul disease. When you look at white people in lynching, they brought their whole families. They carried their children on their shoulders, and they brought their grandmothers, and they took pictures, and they cut off their body parts to send it to their families. That's a disease of the soul. When you watch adults raging and throwing bricks at school children in buses, that's a disease of the soul.
Right. Well, if you specific, they actually cut the penises off of Black men, just to send a message, as it were.
Well, and all the penis envy. I mean, there were a lot of reasons for that, but that's the history. And so as a country, we're going to have to look at the history, and then we realize who Black people are, the saviors of society. And that's, and the universe and God, whatever you call it, put all these things here so that we could keep rising. It's like Maya Angelou, and still we rise in spite of everything. And look at where we are today.
Several ways to go, though, but I hope I think we're on the right track.
Yeah, but we have a great ways to go, but we have everything. We can do it. We have everything that we need to be able to get what else we need. Right. And it's like you said, we're all doing a different part. And what you do, Charles, you say to Black people, do something, speak, go get your representatives, write letters. Don't just do nothing. And then Pharaoh represents the youth. So what do you think, Pharaoh?
With
as far as we have come.
Yeah, I
It's a
mean
miracle.
it is,
It's a
and it's
miracle.
Say
is
the least.
a very it's a very interesting historical example of the similarities but differences that are represented through the African diaspora, you know, and the path and the history that have been lived by African Americans, and how that parallels that of other people from the African diaspora in the Caribbean, South America, still in Africa. And it is all part of a connected story.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's what we're starting to do. We've been doing this. See, just because we don't know about it, there have been people, working on this forever. W.B. Du Bois. I mean, even like Booker T. Washington, he had some very pull yourself up by your bootstraps kinds of ideas, and people, they didn't respect that, but he did what he could do at that time, and now we can do what we can do. Look at all the technology we have. We can,
Right.
and we can do this radio show that we're doing, and then we can put it on YouTube. And
Mhm.
then we can find some way to get people to go and watch. And then
Hmm.
eventually, the word will get out, and then people will go in droves to see what we said.
Right. I believe
Because
that's happening as we speak.
black people are going to first time I heard somebody say that black people were going to save white people, I thought that was totally outrageous. I said, well, why do black people want to save white people? But it's kind of in our it's like in the DNA. It's like when the killer went into a church and killed all of those people in church praying, and they came out and they forgave him for that. That's kind of at the root of things. That's who we are. It's like looking at the young woman who was in the video talking about, I don't care if they burn down Target. And then she said, white people better be happy and glad that black people want to be a part of things and
Right.
not want revenge. That's the thing about black people. You don't hear we're not trying to get revenge. All
Right.
this time, through all these years, we've been trying to be a part of this society, to bring what we have. We've got a lot, all of our gifts, to be young, gifted, and black. We were bringing that to the society. We want to be part of it. And
To
that's
that point,
the
a natural evolution to that point is not necessarily trying to fit into the power structure, but creating your own power structure. You
That's Charles
know.
Charles Blow. That's what
Right.
he's saying. And there
Right.
and there should be that too. There should be
But that's a Garveyism as well.
people
Right.
should do Garvey. Yes, people should be able to do anything that will be beneficial for everybody, because ultimately we're all creators. I mean, it's the spiritual nature of human beings, that we're spiritual beings and human beings, and we create. That comes out of us. That's something that we do. And to the extent that we hold back people so they can't bring their creativity up and bring it for everybody, that has to stop, along with this hoarding of resources. The
Right.
hoarding nature of capitalism is that has all this is going to have to change. It doesn't work.
In full agreement.
So, well, let's say a word of we I'm trying to keep track of the time, because to get this where we want it to go, it has to be only a certain amount of time. So right now we're at 53 minutes. So 1 minute close from each one of you, and then we'll close off. Just 1 minute, no longer.
Real quick, what are you doing individually to be that agent for change that we need? What are you doing? That's it.
Yeah, Pharaoh.
Well, I'm just trying to help contextualize things, lend my voice where I feel it can be helpful, in discussion and research and anything like that, in order to help move things along in regards to how they can be assistive to those ends.
I think to that point, let's dive into that that police bill that's being passed next week. That should perhaps be the focus of our discussion next week.
I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Next week. So everybody, we'll see you. You see, we have 4:30 as our time. So goodbye, Facebook Live, and we'll see you next week. Same time, same place. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.